phenomenal interview for you. Are you buckled up? You better buckle up. Michael A. Wood Jr., former Marine, and in this particular case, more relevantly, former Baltimore Police Department officer, and a guy who's been speaking out about the culture of policing in this country and has some really interesting things to say. 160, he's right next to me. How you doing, Michael? Good to have you here, man. Okay, man, you caught everybody's attention. So let's do a couple of things. At some point, I'm going to flip back and start with who you are, where you grew up, and how you decided to become a cop, etc. But first, let's tell the good people at home what's brought you into this spotlight, right? So you started tweeting about your time as a Baltimore police officer. And you said some pretty interesting things where people were like, whoa. So you were talking about the culture of policing. And I've been talking about the culture of policing on the show quite a bit. And I get a lot of heat for it, where I say, hey, look, I think that they're trained too quick to shoot, right? And I think that we got to bring it down a little bit. I talk about how I'm not sure that they feel that they're part of the community. It feels more like an occupying force. And then you said things that were incredibly similar. So in this case, you have far more credibility than I do as a guy who was a cop in Baltimore. In fact, you used to patrol the area where Freddie Gray was picked up. So tell me about your experience as a cop.
Well, the only person that was surprised by what I said was everybody that doesn't live in the hood. Mm-hmm. Everybody that lives in the hood just went, oh, look, a cop admitted it. But everyone else said, oh my gosh, that really happens? Of course it happens. Did you think the black community was lying for the last 100 years? Is that what we really thought? We thought they were lying?
Yeah, I didn't, but I'm positive.
Right. I mean, as a community, that's what we thought. We thought they were lying. They're not lying. There's nothing else I can say about that. They're not lying. So when I was in, you're in that culture. So it's not that there's a racist cop. It's not that there's like this mass organization, like we have this conspiracy. It's that you go into this culture that has these racist roots that you don't think about, and it's just what policing has become. And so you do it. A suspect gets kicked in the face, somebody makes up a little bit on a PC statement. All this stuff is just what police do. So when you were a good guy joining the good guys, you thought that that's what good guys do. So you go into it, and it just takes you acclimatize to the culture, and then eventually I got to the point where I was like, wait, this isn't making sense.
So one particular thing, there's a million parts to that. I want to discuss all of them in terms of seeing the community as the enemy, et cetera. But there was one part that was super stark where you talk about a group of cops called the knockers who come in and urinate and defecate in people's homes. So I think that was jarring for a lot of people. What is that?
Well, that was a one-off incident that I saw.
Okay.
But I was a knocker at the time. So knockers in Baltimore are the plainclothes officers that you see running around, jacking people up on corners, doing all the drug rips. They're just called knockers to the people there. Mm-hmm. And we had been serving a raid with other units. So you kind of work around the city. The city's too big that you don't know everybody. Mm-hmm. And we did one raid where we were assisting, and somebody did that in the other room. And it was like, what? Did that just really happen?
Okay, so why?
So the story that I got was that some unit had done it before, and it was like, remember when that unit did that. Mm-hmm. But they do it, and we do things like you tear the house apart, you break things, you do things like that, because those are thems. You don't care what you do to them. They're somebody else. They're the enemy. So if it was in Afghanistan and you were throwing things around, you just wouldn't care because they're the enemy. So it's the same thing. It's just callousness.
And is it gratuitous? I mean, obviously, it's defecation on was it their clothes, their bed, something along those lines?
It was in the corner. I think one was a plant, and I don't remember where the other one went. But I thought that they were going to get caught, and I figured, why are they doing that? They're going to get caught.
They never got caught, right?
They never got caught.
Nobody ever turned them in, right?
No, the people I was with were like, I guess they're just going to tell them the canine did it. That makes sense. No one's going to test it. So if you say the canine dog did it,
right,
then that makes perfectly logical sense.
If you had turned them in, would you have been taken enormous heat from the rest of the cops?
You know what happened to Joe Crystal. You know what would happen to me.
Yeah.
Not that I thought of it. I didn't think to do it. Like, saying was not something that was even on the, like, what am I going to do? A, B, or C. Like telling them was E or F or something. It wasn't even on the list. I had A, B, and C. That's it.
Right. And Joe Crystal, for those of you who don't know, is a great cop out of Baltimore who did turn people in. He was a good cop that people talk about. And of course, he got ridden out of town. I mean,
was his first sergeant.
You were his first sergeant? Really?
Yeah, when he was a trainee.
Oh, wow. That's super interesting. And how was your relationship with him?
To be honest, he was a trainee. I didn't care about him.
I get it.
He was the low guy. I was making sure he was getting taken care of and was with a good officer. But that was kind of my extent. He was just to do what I really told him, honestly.
Right. Okay, that's funny. So, but and did you see Joe getting mistreated by the others once he turned in the fellow
later
cops?
on, after he got the reputation? I mean, everybody knew about it. To be completely honest, I really hated his sergeant. I did not like him at all. I had tons of runs in with that guy, so whatever Joey said was completely plausible to me. That supervisor was a bad supervisor. So anything that happened under his watch wasn't going to surprise me.
Well, that's interesting, but nobody was going to turn on that supervisor. They were going to turn on Joe.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Totally.
So, and I did a whole story about that. You should check that out if you haven't seen it on YouTube. Just type in Joe Crystal. He's an amazing guy, and just now he can't even get a job in other police stations. I mean,
Yeah, he had to go to essentially, not to insult that, but it's a step down.
Yeah, and he's in just this really small local community. And when he applies for jobs in Nevada, they say, "Oh, we did a background check on you." No, even though his test scores are great, et cetera. So I assume you're not getting back into policing.
I had no intentions on it.
After what you've confessed to or admitted to it, as to what cops are actually doing, you got to be right next to Joe on that list.
Well, I've been talking for years, actually. It's just no one listened. I had talked a little bit when I was in the agency. Nobody listened. And I had completely switched. My master's is in management. My PhD that I'm going for is in management. I was figuring I was just going another path and leaving that behind. And so I like to talk about it once in a while to local media and stuff. We would talk about it.
And then this happened, right? The Washington Post ran the story. A lot of people have run the story. You were just on Joe Rogan's podcast. Everybody should check that out too. So now I want to get back into the heart of the matter in a minute, because I think the culture is the most important part, right? But before I do that, I want to rewind a little bit. Where did you grow up, and what made you decide to get into policing in the first place?
So I grew up in the suburbs around Baltimore. I never actually was in Baltimore growing up. I always was going to be a cop. I figured that was my path. I was a little wild, so I went into the Marine Corps to get a little discipline before I went in the police department. And as soon as I came out of the Marine Corps, I went straight into the police department. That was always my path. That's what I was going to do.
So you didn't think about going to college at that time?
Nope, I did college while I was in. Did my undergrad while I was working.
Oh, okay, I got you. And did you like being a Marine?
I loved being a Marine. Marine was great. I don't know why anybody has a problem with boot camp or anything else. It was wonderful.
That's interesting, right? Because I think that sometimes people think, well, the guys who tell the truth about what happens in police forces, well, they never fit in the first place. So that's why I'm partly asking these questions. And I get the sense that, no, you didn't mind that kind of aura of the Marines, cops, like that's what you grew up in. That you initially you had no issues with that, right?
Yeah, I voted Republican.
I heard we were talking before the show. I hear you now listen to the Young Turks.
I love the Young Turks.
Oh, hey, all right. So we're not voting Republican anymore?
Nope.
All right. God bless. He's a member, actually. He's my boss. I'm interviewing my boss here. Michael, you get into the police force, and I assume that for a long time. How long did you go before you even began to question what was happening?
At least 5 years, if not 6. The big irony, maybe everybody uses that word wrong, so maybe it's just coincidence. But I went into narcotics. And usually when you go into narcotics, you kind of dive deeper down that hole. And it actually did the opposite for me. It was so deep that I knew it was wrong. And that's when I started to climb out. Okay,
so before I get into the hole of narcotics, tell me all the different positions you were in the police department.
Sure. So I did the academy. After the academy, I went to Gilmore Homes, which is where Freddie Gray was arrested. I walked foot there. So just me and another guy that had no idea what he was doing either. We walk around the hood. That's what you do. After that, I went to the Southern District in an area called Pigtown and an area called Cherry Hill. That's it's only a few blocks south of Gilmore Homes. Same kind of environment, light and office problems that come with it.
Right.
Was always trying to go to the Northern District because I lived in PA. Finally got my transfer to the Northern District. And when I got to the Northern District, I went to this place called Mount Washington, if you've been there. And that was like, where am I? This is Baltimore. Like, I'm driving down Cross Country Boulevard, and there's a stream next to me. I'm like, wow, there's like citizens out mowing the lawn. And so I'm like, well, these are the same people as me. I'm not gonna mess with these people. So I had to get stats. You have to get your arrest. You have to get everything that you're gonna bring back to show you did something. So I can't arrest the judge's son that's walking around there. I'm not gonna jack him up and search him, right? So I would go to the Park Heights into the black neighborhood, and I would get my arrest there so that I can make my supervisors happy, because we all knew I wasn't gonna arrest anybody in Mount Washington.
Wow, God damn, that's interesting. That part of the story I hadn't heard before, right? So, and for those of you unfamiliar with how Baltimore works, the suburbs are perfectly lovely, right?
And areas of the city.
And areas of the city, right? And so, but there are certain parts of the city where, I've always made fun of Baltimore, right? Now I feel bad about making fun of Baltimore because I lived there for 6 months and I lived in DC for 3 years, and my friends lived in Baltimore, so we used to go in and out all the time. And I was making fun of the hood part, although I gotta be honest with you, I was legitimately scared. Like, there's only 2 places I've ever been scared: North Philly and Baltimore, right? And so it's when people look at you super aggressively and keep looking at you, where you're like, okay, I gotta walk a tiny bit faster here because I'm I think I am as open-minded as you can be. On the other hand, I'm not naive, right? Like, so there are some situations that are dangerous, right? But that's not the part I used to make fun of. I feel like in Baltimore, there's mutants. And then we were driving by a hospital one day, and there was like a dude with 2 heads or something and 3 arms. And it turns out that there actually was a hospital with genetic defects. And they would check. I was like, no, I can't believe it. There are mutants in Baltimore, right? Baltimore is a fascinating, fascinating place. Anyway, so by the way, I'm not a bad guy. I only made fun of people with genetic disorders. So anyway, but so when you're in the white areas, like, everybody knew. It wasn't like Michael A. Wood Jr. decided, oh no, I'm not arresting any white people. Like, the cops in that area, you know that, oh, shoot, I might run into a judge's kid, so I'm going to get in trouble if I knock on the wrong door. Or did you even think, like, did all the cops there assume, like, it's not even an issue? Of course we're not going to go and, you know, if there's a guy standing on a street corner in a nice suburb, or again, it's not a suburb in that case, it happens to be part of the city, you're not going to go stop and frisk him, right?
No, it's preposterous. We would never do that.
You would never do that.
No.
God, isn't that amazing, right? So then you just go to the black because you got to get some sort of arrest.
I got to get my numbers. Yeah.
Ah, God damn it. I mean, so what you said in the beginning is just rings even louder, right? Which is that it's just part of the assumption that this is what you do. This is, you go and it's institutional racism to its core, right? Okay, so now when you're in narcotics, what turned you around? What made you? What was your epiphany where you were like, "Whoa, wait a minute, what are we doing here?"
Sure. So after the Northern District is when I went to the enforcement level of narcotics. So the enforcement level goes out and does street rips, kind of does whatever people want you to do to get people off the streets. So I guess the emotional and moral change happened when I would watch the drug dealers. So I would watch them. I would sit in covert, and I would hide in vans or in buildings. I would sit there for like 13, 14 hours a day because I had to get up before they opened, and I couldn't leave until they left. But when you're sitting there, you're watching everything he does, not just seeing him at his worst. So your whole time that you're a cop, you see everybody at their worst. And when I'm watching him sell drugs, he'll get up and sell drugs. And then like one time, I saw him run back, get all excited because a car was coming. And I'm thinking, oh, here's the re-up. This is going to be big. And he runs down and he gets his baby out of the car. And he kind of like before he did that, he told everybody else to go away. So he gets his baby out of the car and he takes him in the house and makes sure everything is good. And then he comes back out and he's like, fuck, it's just a normal person. You know, like he's doing this to make money, but he's not another. He's just one of us doing something different. I would smell the city. I would hear the conversations, as people cooked, and people are next to me. They don't know I'm there, but I hear them. I hear their conversations, and I hear they're talking about what the police are doing, and I can hear it. And it's like I was there unseen, but I was in their community, whether they knew it or not. And it just felt wrong. I felt like I should go and like say hi, but instead of running over and locking people up. It's weird. And I had a particular guy who was younger, and he was selling marijuana. All he did was sell marijuana, which we all know wasn't going to hurt anybody. And he would go out. He was young, had a kid, and he would sell weed to make some money. And then we would lock him up. But then he would have the record, and he would go out there and try to make some money for his kid because he needed diapers. And when we'd be locking him up again, and when I'd interview him, and he would cry, and he would tell me his stories, and I was like, what the heck are we doing? What are we doing? This isn't right. This isn't service. This isn't protecting. I am an active participant in tearing this kid's life down because somebody made a stupid law that doesn't make any sense.
Right. I've had this experience a couple times in my life. Even talking to Jesus, who's our director, longtime director, he grew up in East LA, and he said, look, in our context, the dude who got a job with the electric company climbed up on the poles and made a little bit more money than the other guys at the electric company, and the electric company was a really good job. That was the top of the line. So in that context, nobody thought about going to Harvard or getting their PhD or whatever, right? We just thought, man, wouldn't it be amazing if you could be the guy climbing up on the pole at the electric company, right? And I know when I was doing Big Brother program up at Columbia, when I was going to law school, and it's not the best part of town there either in New York, Washington Heights and stuff. And I realized, look, a lot of the kids told me people sell drugs because what else are they going to do? They literally didn't know any other options. It's not like somebody sat them down and said, okay, if you get really good grades, you could become a doctor or an accountant, and it's not like there was a ton of educational opportunity. There was this, and they just they had all the choices in the world, and they decided, oh no, I'm going to be a bad guy and I'm going to sell drugs. No, they're like, how else would I make money? I literally don't know what else to do, right? Mm-hmm. And so once you get that perspective, you get it, right? How many of the cops that you worked with and you think overall, based on your experience, understand that?
I think a significant portion that grow up in the environment understand it, but they seem to still hold that I think it comes from the institution, that whole pick yourself by the bootstraps thing. Mm-hmm. And they're not seeing that these kids don't have bootstraps. So especially in where the jail is in East Baltimore, you have Perkins homes next to it, and they'll get out. And it's the wall of the jail is a block away from that neighborhood. And the only person they see that has any success is a dealer. He has a car, he has a girlfriend, probably the best looking girl in the area. He goes out and he does things, and he has respect in the neighborhood. And if his dad got into the prison cycle, then his family members in some of these neighborhoods, in Freddie Gray's neighborhood, it was like 30% of the males or something were in Baltimore City Jail. And so they're looking at the jail. It's like they can see their future. And that's all there is, Project Jail. And you just cycle.
You're right. And so how much to go back to the core issue here as it relates to this, how much do the cops see not just the drug dealers, but the entire community as the enemy? Always.
So you are separated. So one of the realizations I came to think of is we even had this ingrained in our symbolatry. So you think of the blue line, thin blue line thing. Mm-hmm. So you have the thin blue line, the black above and the black below. The black above or below, whatever, one of those blacks stands for the bad guys. One of those stands for the good guys. But when you're blue, you're neither. You're not a part of either one of those communities. You're something entirely different. And everybody is a them. That's why when they do something hideous, like what they did to Tamir Rice, they group around and they still say we didn't do anything wrong.
Mm-hmm. So I read what you wrote about Tamir Rice, but obviously I want everybody else to know. I know why I was so angered by that, because they shot the 12-year-old kid in literally 2 seconds. What do you think went wrong there? What should they have done instead?
Everything went wrong there. Everything. Mm-hmm. You don't approach a suspected armed person like that. Mm-hmm. You don't shoot like that before you identify something. everything was wrong. Everything. So if you were to handle that properly, you would you park a block or two away, you approach on foot, keeping cover and concealment so you could get closer, maybe to a point where you could yell at him, maybe even observe him for a second without him seeing you. And when he pulls out the gun, he goes, tink, tink, tink. Oh, it's a damn BB gun. Hey, kid, put the BB gun down. Let's go. But instead, they drive up there, slam on the brakes like it's Dukes of Hazzard or something, jump out of the car, and I mean, he had to be pulling the slack out of that trigger before he was out of the car to shoot somebody that fast. When the kid doesn't even have the gun in his hand, he's only lifting it up, and that's a 12-year-old boy. And then what does he do afterwards? He sits there like he hit a deer as Tamir is dying, gargling for his breath for a while, a long time. And the cop does nothing because that's not a human to him. It's not. It's somebody else, something else.
It's incredibly discouraging, and then you get the rest of the Cleveland cops all rallying around him. That becomes even more discouraging. And so, what do you think about the training? Do you think that they're taught everything's a possible threat to you? Don't take any risks with your life. I don't know. That's why I'm asking you.
Sure. So you may have even heard it's better to be judged by 12 than carried by 6. Common saying.
Yep.
So shoot first. Take no risk. Because you can just, at least if you shoot somebody wrong, at least you're just go and be tried instead of having something happen to you. So you're immediately on the offensive. Everything is about not getting hurt. So like an officer has no responsibility to fight. You have no responsibility to take a moment risk, to hesitate. It's just as soon as you're in fear, that's actually the legal standard, is that you're in fear of your life or in defense of somebody else's life that you're in fear of. So all you have to do is be afraid. So if you're a weak person that can't do anything, it's obviously very easy to be afraid. I mean, there's people who walk around just being afraid of things walking in the street. They're afraid. And so that's if all you need is fear, then you're just going to pull that trigger as fast as you can.
And so, it's really interesting to see this validated by someone who was on the inside. These are all my fears, but when I read your account, and as I'm sitting here talking to you, it's actually a little bit worse than I suspected, right? So I suspected that they were taught, pull the trigger if there's any risk to your well-being, et cetera. But I didn't suspect to what degree the cops viewed themselves an occupying force. I knew that they thought, hey, it's us versus them, but I thought that they would think that, well, the other guy, I mean, obviously he's got kids, he's got a wife, he lives as a human being, like I live as a human being, that there would be some degree of empathy. You're saying that is just very few and far between?
Sure, in an aspect, I could be projecting. I could be just talking about myself. Maybe I lack complete empathy. But I didn't see anybody acting any different than I did. And so you're not seeing them that way. You're not having the empathy. They're not somebody that's just doing that. And the rules do say that you're supposed to have a continuum of force. You're supposed to escalate from pepper spray and baton and all that stuff. But that's not, nobody even knows how to use those things effectively. So when you're afraid, you go to the one you know will stop it. So you have the policy there, but it doesn't mean anything.
So some people are worried about the militarization of police, but you said something interesting, which is that you actually think that they could use a little bit of military training. What do you mean by that?
Well, so from the Marine Corps, I was taught to shoot proficiently. I'm not worried about using my weapon. I know if I need to use it, I will be able to use it effectively, and I will be able to do it better than the other guy is doing it. So I didn't have that fear. It was just that if this goes down, I know what to do. I've been trained for this. It's cool. No big deal. I'm not going to step my boundaries, but if he crosses this line, I'm going to give him a line. If he crosses that line, then I'm going to act. But it's going to be a decent line. And I have to say pretty much the same about everyone else that I served with that had served in combat arms. Let's not just say the military, because some people in the military go and repair satellites and stuff. But combat arms.
And so you think the guys that served in combat arms had a little bit more restraint than the average cop?
Yeah, because they're not afraid. So that's the thing, is you have fear. So if you have the fear, then you'll do what you'll jump to that level. But if there's no fear, you hesitate.
Right.
And that's what you need to do. You need to hesitate. That's our job.
One of the things that I say on the show is the biggest crime in America is disrespecting a cop. Like, it's not actually on the books, right? There's no law that says you're not allowed to disrespect police officers. But you could, run someone over, you could rape someone, you could shoot 9 people in a black church, and you'll get they'll pick up Burger King for you, and everything will be fine as long as you're respectful when the cops show up, right? But if you're in any way don't follow a command, a world of hurt's coming your way. Am I overstating that, or is that roughly right?
No, I mean, there's a thing where people say you get locked up on a humble. So if you ask
I don't know that. What is that?
if you ask a dealer or you ask somebody, a 16 to 24-year-old black male in the ghetto, they've been locked up on a humble once before, and that means that they're being humbled. So they ran their mouth a little bit, so they got a disorderly, or they did something, so you're writing them a bull parking ticket or moving violation or something like that. So it's just
There's even a term for it. I didn't know that. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to humble you. By the way, if you humbled a kid in the suburbs and you put a criminal record on him, that'd be a huge deal.
I imagine that citation would be revoked before you handed it in.
Right? Whereas if you do it in the community, what power does that kid have to fight back against?
None. That's why you do it.
It's so frustrating. And your first thing is ringing through my head. Did you think to the whole country, did you think the black community all across the country was lying all this time? No, this is what they experienced. They know it. You don't know it because you didn't live that. Because when the cops show up in the nice white neighborhoods with the streams, they don't go and do the same things.
Right. They're not going to.
Wow, it's incredible to hear from someone who lived it. So, okay, let's talk about how in the world can we fix it? I mean, how endemic do you think it is to cops all over, not just in Baltimore? And then what can we do about it?
I think all the urban cities are the same. So I think if you're talking about Philly, you're talking about Cleveland, you're talking about Atlanta, Oakland, all these places are the same. I can't imagine anything different. We've actually had officers from New Orleans that came after Katrina, and they just fit in just fine. If somebody from Philly and Boston, they can all come in, everything will be fine. So it's endemic. It's the entire system, and I think it's actually reflective of the entire nation. I think it's just a microcosm in the police department where, because you have that power, you can live out that racism that's in our society, and you don't even have repercussions for it or worry about it whatsoever, because that's what everyone else is doing. So when I first thought about it and was first talking to people, I think the first thing we need to lead with is empathy, because we just have to try to see things from the other people's side, which is going to be hard to teach people, but we really need to focus on that. That's just another human, and tear down these walls. We have flags, and we have, I'm Republican or I'm Democrat, or I have this and I have that, and nations, Confederate flags, American flags, and we take all these things and we build them up, and we let walls divide all of our society. We're all the same. We have to tear down these walls, and we have to start empathizing with other human beings. And for policy, we have to start policing with science. So in Colorado and in Portugal, they lowered their juvenile usage of marijuana. How did they lower their juvenile usage of marijuana?
They decriminalized it.
So if you want to lower, then you legalize and you control. So you're not actually trying to legalize. You're continuing right now to feed the prison industrial complex. You're not worried about whether you're actually lowering the rates or not, because we know how to lower the rates. You're just afraid to do it because you have something else going on. And then as I thought about it more, how can we do this? I'm never going to be in charge. Somebody that speaks like me is never going to be in charge. So the first thing we have to do is, I'm going to sound like a shill, but we have to get the money out of politics. Because if we don't do that, if Wolfpack doesn't win, we don't have the politicians that we need to take the risk on somebody that talks like I do.
God bless, man. If I had the soundboard here, I'd do a crowd cheer. Okay, so I'm obviously with you on that, but how would you put it into the training? Would you put literally empathy? Hey, you know what? Today's the day where we go out and into the community, and whatever it is, right? We do a picnic.
Yes.
We go to the local elementary school.
Mm-hmm. It sounds cheesy, but we do. And the reason that I really lean back on that is there was a time where the officers in the city actually get treated incredibly bad by command and by the city. And one of the examples was one of the reasons I was a cop is so I could get my degree, and they would do tuition reimbursement. So I was doing tuition reimbursement, and they cut it off right towards the end. Just no more tuition reimbursement. So I had to start paying for the rest of it. We all complained enough, and they said, okay, we'll give you some tuition reimbursement, but you got to volunteer at the rec centers. And cops are like, oh, I'm not volunteering at a rec center, come on. Mm-hmm. And then I went to the rec center. Mm-hmm. My first day, I was like, this is awesome. these are good kids. Like, this is regular life. I'm not in the middle of some kind of combat zone like I thought I was. The next time I went, I brought my daughter with me, and she came with me every single time, and we all played with the kids, and we all had a good time. And it wasn't, sure, that's not the thing that flipped the switch finally, but it played a role in that, in seeing everybody as a human and becoming more of a part of that community. Because any of those kids that I was there with then, if 5, 10 years down the line, I saw them on a corner, I would approach that kid a really, really different way. And if another officer would have approached that kid and jacked him up, I would have been like, whoa, no.
Because you know him.
Right.
Of course, that makes a huge difference if you know the kid. That's why back in the Mayberry days, the Matlock, whatever he was called back then, Andy Griffith, in the TV show, they treat people totally different. It's not like they were going around, him and Don Knotts busting heads in Mayberry, right? Because they knew everybody in Mayberry, right? And they knew that was the plumber's kid and that was the grocery store clerk's kid. So now the cops didn't want to go to the rec center. See, from my way of thinking, since I'm not a cop, I think, well, what could be wrong with the rec center? People are going to do good things. They're like, they're getting together to socialize. That's a positive thing. Why did the other cops not want to go to the rec center?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, it's just like you don't think about integrating into the society. You just want to get your job over with, go home, and not worry about it.
Maybe it makes the job easier if you don't empathize. Like,
that was my original thing. So my original thing was actually I tried to be like a RoboCop. So I tried to think I won't react. I won't see race. So that's how I will not have bad practices. I will totally ignore race, and I would just focus on what we do, what police do. And eventually I realized, well, when I'm doing that, I'm not seeing the racist institution that I'm participating in because I'm blinding myself. It kind of had a backwards effect that being blind to racism doesn't let you see when there's racism. It's weird.
It's fascinating to see all this stuff confirmed and even amplified, the stuff we've been talking about on the show from a guy who was on the inside. So one more thing about the corruption. How often do cops lie for one another, including on the stand?
Daily.
All the time?
Yeah, sure. I mean, somewhere in the city that size, daily.
Daily, yeah. Right. Was it a big deal to lie on the stand or not that big a deal?
I wouldn't do it. That was kind of my line. Like, I would cover for you until I was in that situation. You're like, I'm not going to jail for you. I don't care who you are. If I'm sitting on that stand, sorry, you're getting the truth.
Right.
You're going down. I'm going to have to say it at this point in time. But they'll lie against suspects all the time. So they'll say they saw things. So like a CI, if you have a confidential informant, the way our rules are done and the law is written, you have to make sure that CI has nothing on him, then you give him the money, then he goes and does the buy, and you watch the whole thing. Right? That's the rule. And then you come back, you get the drugs from him, you make sure he has nothing else on him, you can submit the thing, the narcotics. It's impossible to watch him. It's impossible. How are you going to watch the guy go and make a deal and come back? You can't do it. You're going to give it away.
Right.
So everybody writes it like it happened, like they watched the whole thing. And how do you watch the whole thing? You can't.
Almost none of them do actually watch the whole thing.
Or when they run, a dealer runs and he'll throw the bag, the stash, whatever. If I don't see him do it, whatever, you win. You got it. All right, we'll try again tomorrow. But plenty of people would say they saw him drop it. And
right.
You didn't. He hit the corner. We all know you didn't see him do it.
Right. Yeah. So, yep. Again, unfortunately, not surprised by that. How about the black cops? Were they part of this system? Did they get discriminated against? How is that dynamic?
I think they have it extra hard. I'm putting conjecture in how they treat the citizens, but I do think, just like NWA said, they're worse as a general rule. But I've always thought that was the impression I got was because they were in this policing and they felt the same way, that this is what the good guys do. It was the systematic racism that they're not recognizing either, and they would be extra harder on the black citizens because they felt like it was embarrassing their race. So it was like an insult.
Interesting. Okay, I would have thought that it was to impress the other cops, like, hey, I'm with you guys. I'm not with the enemy. I'm with you guys. I'm with the good guys. But you're saying no, that it's actually more predominantly they're pissed at the other black.
Yeah, that's what it all felt like to me. So when I talk to people, granted, I'm still talking to a limited subset, but that's the impression I always got.
That's interesting. And was there much racism against other black cops, or did you guys think, no, we're all blue?
That's the other problem. They'll say they're all blue. It's just not true. Black cops are punished more harshly. We actually had a lawsuit where they had to change the promotional system for them. The reason why I wrote some promotional guides trying to help people was because you could see that the good old boy network up top would like handpick who they wanted to be the next group of supervisors and kind of like pass the information down to them. But they weren't generally picking any black guys. They were picking the same. Well, that's why when you see command staff, it tends to also be, it starts to turn white. The higher rank you go, you start dwindling in your minorities. And then they would have these, okay, so I have to tell a story. That's the only way I can explain it. I was in charge of medical for a while. And there was an officer, Jermaine Cook, who was a detective in VSID. And he got off duty. He was essentially jumped in a hate crime by a bunch of white guys in the county. And when he's calling 911, he's telling them, you can hear him telling them he's an officer, and he needs, they need to stop what they're doing, and he has his badge on him, and they end up assaulting him, blinding him in one eye, and he had to go to the hospital, have all these surgeries. He finally comes back to the agency, and he's trying to come back to full duty because he's a dedicated cop. He is. But the deputy commissioner is fighting him, saying he's got to leave. He can't come in. Even though he's passing everything, he's got to get out of the agency. Even though he's a victim of a hate crime, he had his badge on him, but they're saying he didn't have his gun, so that didn't qualify him for on duty. At that same time, that same deputy commissioner is calling me and trying to get me to cover up for one of his white buddies who has a deaf hearing problem that has nothing to do with policing, so that I cannot do his medical paperwork so that he can last long enough that he gets his regular pension, because he wouldn't get that with his medical condition. Mm-hmm. So I'm pushing Jermaine out, who's a victim of a hate crime, while he's asking me to cover for his buddy. And so I raised a fit, saying, I'm not covering for your buddy, you've lost your mind. Mm-hmm. So he just punished both of them, of course. They both went out.
Yeah.
In the medical.
Yeah. So, because it seems to me logically that it's hard to say, okay, if we're in a white neighborhood, we're not arresting anybody, we're not stopping and frisking, we're not beating anybody down. We're in a black neighborhood, we do that systematically. And now I see a black person who happens to be a cop. No, that's where I draw the line, and all of a sudden I become colorblind. That idea of the black community as the enemy has got to seep in to some degree to the blacks on the force.
Yeah, certainly it does. There's no question. They're participating just as much as anybody else. We're all the same thing. We're all doing the same job, thinking that this is what is good, so we don't finish the logic cycle. So like one time I was a shift commander, and I told my guys, stop pulling over these stupid car stops. Like I would see guys that pull over a cute girl, or they would pull over an old lady or something like that. Like, look, you're not getting guns and drugs out of these cars. Stop. Mm-hmm. In Baltimore, we focus on who commits crimes in Baltimore. And who commits crimes in Baltimore? 16 to 24-year-old black males commit crimes in Baltimore. That's who you do car stops on. That's who you focus on. Makes sense to a level. Mm-hmm. And then you go, well, why are they the ones committing the crimes? So we're arresting them because they have a previous marijuana possession charge that we jacked them up on a corner for and took out of their pocket illegally. And now they're driving in their car, but they missed the court date, so they have a warrant out. Mm-hmm. So now we're locking him up for a warrant, and he's now loses his job, and he gets his license suspended. And then he's driving, and we're pulling him over, and we're locking him up for that again. So that cycle, we did. We started that. We perpetrated. So that's completely illogical that even if you say to yourself, I'm focusing on the 16 to 24 black males because those guys are the ones that commit crimes. Yeah, but they're committing crimes because we push them into the cycle. If we want to stop them from committing crimes, we have to stop pushing them into a hopeless cycle.
Whereas the white guy never got jacked up on the corner. You never found the drugs on him, even though whites smoke marijuana at the same rates,
same
if
or
not, or slightly more than African Americans do. And so they never missed a court date. They never had a suspended license. You never even pulled them over in the first place because you were pulling over 16 to 24-year-old black males. And then some racists will come along and say, well, you see, blacks commit more crime.
Right, exactly.
No, well, if the only people you're looking at is black folks for crimes, you're going to find more black folks for crimes, right? God, it's a super depressing cycle. And two last things about that. One is going back to the idea of solutions. Do you think we're going to break out of it? I mean, or do we? How long can this go on? This perpetual cycle of keeping one community down that is so depressing and so oppressive. How does it change? Does it ever change?
It does change. If we stop feeding the prison industrial complex, stop buying politicians by making money off of keeping people in jail cells so they keep the cycle going, if we can get the money out of politics, we can get the politicians that will say, hey, I'm sorry, I don't need your dirt money from your industrial prison complex. We can stop this and we can start making changes. We can start getting so we can decriminalize. I mean, I think decriminalize is a half measure. I think you need to go for the full measure. You need to treat it like a medical problem. It's a medical problem, not a crime problem.
How much of the problem is drugs? If you legalize drugs tomorrow, how much of this vicious cycle do you take away?
So you have to get over the hump of what you're going to do with the drug dealers. Mm-hmm. After you get over that hump, I mean, I think crime drops 90%. It's 90% of what I do, what I did.
90%. Isn't that amazing? This is phenomenal. Okay. And so, and by the way, if you get the money out of politics, they might actually represent their communities. And then the community might say, hey, you know what? Right. We're kind of tired of getting bulldozed and steamrolled, and perhaps you should look into representing us. But now, even if they technically represent the community, they know that donor money is what gets them elected, so they don't actually have to represent the voters of that community at all, and they don't, right? So, and finally, have you gotten any feedback from your fellow cops from back in the day?
Well, of course, there's a lot of troll, hate from people that are cops, but the phone calls have all been supportive.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. So you'll get calls from guys you...
people that know me, I don't think they're the least bit surprised that I said any of this. They
right.
know I've been saying a lot of this stuff. It's just suddenly somebody paid attention. I guess maybe the Freddie Gray incident had a play in that. But
And they're calling you and saying, attaboy, go get him?
Well, just as long as you're telling the truth, it is what it is, and we'll deal with it.
Okay. And then, but the people online, no, not exactly.
No, they throw all their hate out there.
So... well, like we said earlier, you're done with policing because...
It looks that way.
Whether you like it or not, whether you want to or not. So definitely good luck with your PhD.
Thanks. I'll need it.
It's in management?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Well, we're rooting for you. And look, I want to thank you on behalf of a lot of people watching who I think share my sense of relief of finally someone on the inside saying, yes, of course that's what was happening. Like, there's been this blue line, this wall of lies. Like, no, what you see with your own eyes, what you see in the data, what you see in the black community saying it over and over again, not true, not true, not true. We're the good guys. We never do anything wrong. There's nothing wrong with the culture. It's just a few bad apples. For someone on the inside, the orchard, to come out and say, no, of course that's true. Of course all these problems exist. And I think that is the first step in finding out a solution, to be honest with it so that we know the depth of the problem so that we can begin to fix it. All right, Michael, you're the best. Thank you, man. Really, really appreciate it.